Man, I'd eat the shit out of that raccoon. Hello everyone, David here. So by the time that you watch this, I'm probably going to be in San Diego for Comic Con. Like I've stated before, I'm actually going to Comic Con to check it out. I'm not going in this very in-depth kind of way like other people do where they drive for hours, although I will be driving for a couple of hours. But I'm not going to be waiting in these long lines, waking up like at 6 or 5 in the morning so that I can check out these panels. If I can make to any panels, that's awesome. If I can check some of these stuff out and get some exclusives or something like that, I'm just going as a first time thing to see if I truly like it. And if I do, maybe I'll repeat it next year with more days, more badges, and more plans. But before I get out of here, I do want to talk about Telltale's new episode of Season 2 of The Walking Dead, which is Episode 4, entitled Amid the Ruins. And like always, I'm going to talk about the episode without any spoilers and just breaking down every facet of the episode before I finally give it my rating. And then I'll go ahead and talk about some of the things that I liked or did not like about the story, spoiler-wise, at the end of the video. And episode 4 deals with the ramifications after the events of episode 3 and how Clementine's group has to reconnect and deal with these consequences while at the same time trying to survive. And like I said, that's as much as I can get into without getting into spoilers because there are some things to talk about, but I'll save that for the end of this episode. What I can talk about without getting to spoilers would have to be my biggest complaint with the story this time around. And that is that maybe it's just me, but did anyone else feel like the majority of this episode had characters bickering to one another saying, we gotta let go of this person, we gotta get rid of this person, this person's a liability, this person's dangerous, you should really consider being around these certain people because they're gonna get yourself killed. It just felt like they were repeating that over and over in this episode, and it really did detract away from some of the potential that this episode could have done by having these characters pull off some of these rather dramatic moves instead of simply just talking about them. However, the writing makes up for that in the development of Jane's character, which is the other thing that I can kind of talk about without getting into spoilers. This episode really does flesh out the character of Jane, because in the previous episode, I was worried that the character of Jane and Mike were going to be these expendable characters who are just going to be in the background and they're not going to pay attention to them. But fortunately, episode 4 does two things. One, it fleshes out Jane's character, it makes her more likable, it makes her easier to connect with, and even though you feel for her the same way that Clementine does, where you can't exactly pin her down as either a good guy or a bad guy, in fact you can go as far as to say that she might be the Daryl of this group, she is fascinating. She's fascinating to watch and to see how she thinks and how she sees this world after we get an idea of what her past was like. And seeing her dynamic work with Clementine and seeing the two of them work with one another and Clementine learning new moves from her, it was good to get a chance to see that within this episode before it ended. And Mike's character, whereas he didn't get developed, he got the short end of the stick there because he got no development whatsoever. He was, however, a viable person to the group. He was useful. He wasn't just a character that was in the background. He had an essential role to play physically within this group. And when everything is dark and grim and depressing, it's good to have that one character who sheds a little bit of light on the situation by lightening up the tone with a little bit of humor. And Mike was able to bring that with a really comical joke involving a raccoon. The rest of the story for episode 4 is pretty much by the numbers Walking Dead, and that can be either a good thing or a bad thing. For one, there are some moments that tug at your heartstrings like Telltale usually does with this franchise. But on the other hand, there are moments where you could declare the story within this episode to be the first ever filler episode for not only season 2 but the whole game in general, because there were moments where I felt like maybe they were dragging on the situation just a tad much because they were doing things that we've seen before and quite frankly I'm getting just a little tired of. Again, can't get into too much detail right now, but I'll save that later on for the spoiler section of this video. The rest of the episode, it's, like I said, by the numbers. Not only in terms of the story, but also in terms of every other facet of the episode. It's pretty much the same. The presentation is still the same, which I guess is saying it's beautiful. The artwork is still great. The animation is still fluid. I'll dare say that they actually went ahead and polished up some of the glitches. It's not as fidgety as before. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is the first episode where I hardly noticed, if any at all, those instances where you would have the loading screen, but then you start hearing the audio from the cinematic and you're like, where's the video? I'm not getting the video. That hardly happened at all, so I give Telltale credit for polishing that up this time around. And the gameplay is pretty much the same. Nothing new gets invented or introduced here, and there's hardly any of it, much like the previous episode. In fact, I will dare say that this might have a lot less gameplay than the previous episode did, so expect to sit around and just witness the story before finally interacting with it here and there. My only nitpick with the gameplay this time around would have to be the decisions that Telltale always has you do in these games that give you the impression that you're making a big choice, even though you're kind of not really. But up until this point, they've been kind of subtle in keeping it hidden that any choice that you make, it's going to have the same outcome, or at least a similar outcome. In this episode, however, there were certain details that gave me the impression that it would have ended up a certain way, either decision that I made. At least up until the final one, which I'm not going to give away, but I feel like the majority of the decisions that I made in this episode didn't really have that much of an effect, even though it kept saying, so-and-so will remember that, or so-and-so will keep that in mind. Never really felt like it was going to matter in the end, especially one involving you choosing between one character's life or the other. Due to some of the circumstances in that situation, I felt like it was going to end up the same way no matter what I chose, and sure enough, that's how it ended up being. But like I said, the exception would be that last one, right before it ends. That one literally made me put aside my controller and go, what did I just do? And yeah, that's pretty much it for episode 4 of season 2 of The Walking Dead. So I will still say that this was a good episode. I didn't think it was worthy of saying this is the first bad episode of the Walking Dead video game. I can't believe this. No. And for that, I am still going to pass episode 4 entitled Amid the Ruins for season 2 of the Walking Dead video game with an 8 out of 10. But I will have to say it's a low 8 out of 10 because I still stick with what I thought about some of those problems that the episode had. And I will go as far as to say that even though I enjoyed the episode, it is probably my least favorite of the franchise so far. So, now that that's over with, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and delve into some spoiler territory here. So, if you have not played episode 4 of the Walking Dead video game for season 2, do not watch the rest of this video. Go download it, play it, and then come back at this point in the video, whatever it is. And let's go ahead and talk about some spoilers. So, obviously, when it comes to spoilers in The Walking Dead, the big thing that everybody doesn't want to get ruined for them would be the character deaths. And I'm not entirely sure, I don't know the statistics, but I will go as far as to say that maybe this is the episode with the most main character deaths in the Walking Dead video game so far. I think they killed off like 4 main characters. 4 characters in episode 4. Will we be seeing 5 character deaths in episode 5? Oh my god, they're gonna kill off everybody. It's like the Red Wedding. It's like the Dead Wedding. And 2 of them I liked, 1 I didn't really like, and the other I really did feel for. The 2 that I liked were Sarita and Rebecca, who were both motherly figures, and one of them was literally a mother by the end of this episode. So to see them leave behind children or children figures, because even though Sarita didn't have an actual child, she did have Clementine, she did have Sarah at that time. So to see to witness these characters getting killed off and leaving behind a child, or like I said, child figure, is kind of heart-wrenching. It really does get to you when you really think about it. And they were likable characters. Sarita was a little bit more likable, but Rebecca really did come around, especially by this episode, and seeing what she had to go through, you really did sympathize for her. So to see her go was one thing. To see her go as she's turning right before her baby, that was quite frenetic. That was the choice that really did make me go, wow, did I make the right choice? I don't think I did, because the others I'm like, okay, it's gonna end up the same way, at least that's the idea that I'm getting. It was this one during the cliffhanger when it cut to black where I'm like, shit, I don't think I should have done that. The death that really made me feel an awful lot of despair was Sarah. Seeing Sarah go, I honestly was not expecting that. I was expecting her to somehow get saved and maybe sacrifice Jane, but again, like I said, that was one of those decisions where due to the details of the circumstance, I can kind of tell this is how it's going to end. But Sarah, who's like, what, 10, 11, hearing her cry out for her dad while she's getting torn apart by the walkers, that just got to me. I'm like, oh God, I hate this. I hate this. And it does harken back to the earlier conversation that Jane was having with Clementine about her sister. It did mirror that somewhat, where me as the player, or as Clementine I should say, you kind of ponder, maybe she wanted this, maybe she didn't want to continue her life being in shock and being in terror and just wanting her dad. Now she can be reunited with her dad. So it's something to really think about, and it's gotten me to think about for quite some time. The death that I didn't like was Nick. I'm not a huge fan, I'm not a fan at all really, when writers decide to kill off characters just like that in like the preceding episodes. I understand if they kill off certain characters, but they do it in a way where it really does have a lasting effect on not only the characters in the story, but also us as viewers, or in this case, as gamers, as players. I don't like it when they have characters go away, and you follow those characters, and then when you come back, poof, this character's dead. And you didn't get a chance to like say goodbye. And I know that that's how it is in the real world, and that's what The Walking Dead is trying to evoke. But I didn't get a sense of that with Nick. I'm just like, wow, just killed off. He didn't even have some screen time to say, oh hey look, there's Nick in this episode. And some people didn't really like Nick, so they'll be okay with it. Me, even though I was quite indifferent towards Nick, would have liked for a proper send-off. And Telltale, I get it, you're trying to gross us out, but I felt like it was a little too gratuitous to have Clementine hack away his jaw at first and then skim the side of his head and then finally kill him. It was just, I don't know. Telltale has grossed us out previous in the season. The one scene that has stuck in my head is the one where Clementine has to sew her wound together, and I just cringe at the thought of it. But it made sense because we needed to go through that. As Clementine, we needed to heal that wound. Here, we didn't need to see Clementine chop away Nick's head one by one before she finally got to him. I just felt like that was Telltale dragging it out a little too much just for the sake of grossing us out. And as for Jane and her development and her backstory about her little sister and all that, I did like it. I thought it was pulled off really well. It's something that we've kind of seen before. In fact, it kind of reminded me of Andrea from the TV show because she had a sister and we actually did witness that. But here, it was pulled off rather well, so I still enjoyed it, even though it was some familiar territory. What was definitely a little too familiar, and I feel like Walking Dead is just doing this over and over again, and I'm getting a little tired of it, would be the whole scenario of our main characters finding somebody, and the game forces you to decide whether or not you want to like rob this guy, or kill him, or let him go and let him be fine with whatever it is that he had on him. And then the game pulling off a reverse to what it is that you chose. If you kill him off, it turns out he was a good guy and he meant well. Or if you let him go, it turns out he had a band of thugs and they come back and they rob you. They do the same thing here in this episode, and I kind of wish that... And I understand there's going to be people like that in this world. I understand that's how it's going to be. But can we kind of get away from that for a while? It's like when we wanted to get away from the prison in the TV show. I really want to get away from those scenarios, at least for some time. The only saving grace is that I feel like Arvo could be a really well-developed character in the next episode, the finale, and maybe he could be a character that can lead into a potential Season 3, should there ever be one. Because you can kind of tell that maybe he's being controlled by these thugs. He doesn't look like he actually wants to do it. In fact, he wasn't really going to... There's the possibility that maybe he didn't want to tell the thugs about these people, but they somehow got it out of him. So maybe Arvo could potentially become an interesting character, but for now I really wish that they will derail from those very familiar scenarios from here on out. So that's it for my review as well as my spoiler talk for episode 4, Amid the Ruins, for season 2 of The Walking Dead game. Let me know what you guys thought. Be a little cautious in the comments because this is both a spoiler-free and spoiler-full review, so put a warning or something like that. Don't spoil it for people. Don't be a douche. Just don't do it. And I thank you guys for watching, and I'll probably see you guys at Comic-Con the next time we meet. See you then.